Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois. And we have got a great show for you today, folks. We're going to be talking about CSAs. What is that? We'll find out with local foods educator Nick Frillman. He's going to give us the whole lowdown on what is a CSA and maybe why you might consider joining one. I can't do this by myself. We are joined every single week by our co-host, Katie Parker, our local food systems and small farms educator. Hi, Katie. Oh man, I muddled it up again 2 times in a row.
That's okay. You'll get it 3rd time's the charm. How are you doing?
I am doing great, sitting here in my basement, freezing my toes off. So how about yourself?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I mean, it's cold outside too, so hopefully it'll warm up in these next couple of days.
Precisely, and that's kind of the way you got to look about it is it'll get warm eventually. This is all temporary. That maybe if we lived on the equator in a tropical rainforest, we could be like, this is all that there is.
Right.
But no, yeah, we have something to look forward to.
We kind of brought it on ourselves. We did choose to live here, so.
Exactly. And someone who I know is ecstatic to be living in the sub-freezing weather is horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello. There's a reason I left Florida and came back to Illinois.
The freak like freezes that occur, but they're not really that cold in the middle of winter in Florida weren't enough for you?
No, I think the 5 years we were there got below freezing maybe 5 or 6 times.
Not enough to kill the pythons, right? So
Nope.
No.
Well, even that further south, you get even less than that. We were in North Florida.
Oh goodness. Oh my. That's true. You were in North Florida. Well, I don't know. Katie, it's cold out. The one thing that I have been comforting myself with is like seed catalogs, kind of planning and thinking about what's coming up this year. And there are some options for us when it comes to fresh local fruits and veggies, CSAs, which Nick's going to tell us about. But have either of you ever been a part of a CSA before?
I have not.
I haven't either.
Yeah, same here. I could only say that I have participated in helping a grower with the CSA. So that's about as far as I can say that. Probably because on a typical summer, I have way too many tomatoes anyway to know what to do with. So maybe if I want something besides tomatoes, I should look at a CSA. So without further ado, let us introduce our guest for this week, local foods educator, Nick Frillman. Nick, welcome to the show.
Hello, Chris, Ken, and Katie. Good to be with you.
Well, it is good to have you here, Nick, once again, following our nice little holiday break that we had. I'm curious, Nick, as we kick this off and talking about CSAs, could you just help us with these acronyms real quick? What is a CSA?
Yeah. So I guess it's not what is a CSA, it's what is CSA, because what it stands for is community supported agriculture. So yeah, it is referred to as like a concept, also something that you can be a member in. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, but like I said, community supported agriculture. So community members investing, in this case, their money upfront for a share of the farm, basically a share of the dividends of what the farm produces on anywhere from a monthly to biweekly to weekly basis, depending on what type of agriculture you're supporting, be it vegetable, fruit, meat, eggs. So I'm kind of getting into the weeds already. Do you have any other acronym-based questions, or did that cover it?
I think that's it. So community-supported agriculture, and that sounds pretty broad right now, but yeah, so we'll dive into that today.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So you kind of hit on some of this already. So, but kind of give maybe a little more detail on what exactly does this kind of community supported agriculture mean, and if you're a farmer, kind of what does that mean on your end?
Yeah. Okay. So let me take a step back here. So the origin of CSA is actually from other countries, Japan, and actually other places. That could be a whole podcast, is the history of CSA. I'm just going to skip right to when it got to the United States, about 1970s, and it was an East Coast phenomenon at first. So from there, migrated to the Midwest, and now we have CSA subscriptions available for purchase. So what is that? How does it work? So how it works is, if I'm a small farmer, let's just take the example of a vegetable farmer in our area. At the beginning of every year, you're looking at the seed catalogs. Like Chris mentioned, you got to buy your seeds. You also might need to get new irrigation equipment and harvesting stuff and hire labor for the season. And there are a ton of startup costs at the beginning of the season. Same thing as conventional, cash grain. Same goes in the vegetable farming world. And so how does a farmer potentially cover all these costs if they didn't have a lot of leftover cash at the end of the previous year? Is they make available for sale shares of their future farm products, just like you might get a share of the dividends of a stock if you were to buy a stock. So this is the same kind of thing, except instead of putting money into the stock market hoping you get something back, you're putting your food dollars to work for you to support local agriculture that the producers, can use to buy their things that they need to get the season going up front. And then, so, you might be looking at a couple $100 all the way up to $500+. And at first that seems to boggle the mind a little bit. That's quite a bit of cash for somebody to put together and not get anything back for a good amount of time. But it actually usually works out to about $20 to $25 a week is about the average price, depending on what the product is. And so once you're paid up, you have like farm credit with the farmer, and they'll give you a share weekly at some point during the growing season. Typically May is when a lot of them get going if they're vegetables. Then you'll get a weekly or biweekly share of what is most fresh, most delicious, etc. On the farm at that time, curated to you, usually at a pickup location close to you for convenience. So that was quite a bit of info. Feel free to ask some follow-up questions.
So Nick, it seems like you know a lot of information about CSA. How did you become most familiar with what a CSA is?
Yeah, I did become very familiar with CSAs. I worked on a vegetable farm in Sandy, Oregon during 2020. I got there about 5 days before the pandemic started, and with hopes of getting to know lots of new people out there and checking out the local breweries and hiking a lot. And then everything closed down. So it was the perfect time to learn how to vegetable farm and learn the ins and outs of the CSA program that the farm put on. So the farm, which folks can find on Instagram, super great Instagram page I recommend following, called Slice of Heaven Farm in Sandy, Oregon. Their family farm is a CSA and 2 farmers market farm. So they grow vegetables for one farmers market in Sandy, one in Gresham, Oregon, which is an eastern suburb of Portland, and then their CSA program, which is about, last time I heard, it was about 100 subscriptions. So roughly speaking, they put together a bag or box, we would do, of whatever was most fresh in season, as well as staples that they tried to have every week for people in the Sandy, Oregon area to pick up either at the farmer's market or on farm. And those shares typically had staples like carrots and lettuce, but also some more adventurous things like radishes and bok choy and other Asian greens. One of the proprietors of the farm is Filipina. So that was a big crash course on how they work, how much they cost, where to pick up, what goes into making the shares available, and what kind of cost farmers are facing at the beginning of the season.
So Nick, you talk about CSAs and you say shares, and you're investing in this farm so they can invest in themselves, and then your dividend is you get to fill your belly with their food that they grow. This sounds a lot. It's like toe and toe with stock markets, almost. It's just. But I don't know. When it comes to shares in the stock market, you can kind of go bad. Is there ways things can go wrong in a CSA?
Yeah, that's a great point. And yes, there are definitely. So especially if you're supporting a farmer who's relatively new to the game. But even with experienced growers, things can go wrong, right? So if they're newer growers, they might not plan their succession planting quite right. So if they have a goal of having lettuce and carrots in every box for 20 weeks from May to October, a couple weeks they might over harvest or under harvest, and you might not get both those items every single week. That's like the not that bad end of what can happen. The worst end of what can happen is what happened to us this past year. Our CSA subscription we had at the beginning of 2021 was a farmer who unfortunately was affected by our 15 inches of rainfall in McLean County event. And he had, water, he and his partner had water 6 feet above all their plants. And a lot of them were, just not salvageable. And we ended up, we had some cash, some credit left with the farmer. We had just started getting our shares. So it was a few weeks into the season. And a lot of folks that had shares with them ended up donating the balance of their shares to help them recover. So we paid the full price for our CSA for like 24 weeks and we got 3 weeks out of it. But we believe that our food dollars were best spent helping that farmer recover for this coming year. And thankfully, they're going to be back in business this year. They've rented higher ground. So that's good news. But crop failures can happen. Out in Oregon, there were wildfires that dumped ash on some of our plantings from a nearby fire. So it's definitely a risk. But when it really pays off, and when the farmers are doing a great job producing, it's super rewarding and a very intimate food experience to have.
Yeah. So like everything in life, there is risk involved in this.
That's correct. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there are definitely folks in your area, farmers that have been doing the CSA thing for quite a long time. So a good bet if you're, interested in this, but maybe a little bit more risk averse. Do some calling around, see what options there are nearby to you, and see who's been doing it for a long time. Because guaranteed, if you've been doing this for 5, 10 plus years as a farmer, you've seen some things and things have happened to you and you've persisted. That's part of the agriculture game, is persisting when the going gets tough. So they're probably not going anywhere if they've stuck around for this long.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned a lot of times we're getting vegetables and stuff like that, but what all can you get from a CSA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So people typically have gotten to know CSA through vegetable options mostly, and that's inclusive of the CSA options that started off the trend in the United States. So those northeastern, East Coast CSAs, especially around the New England area, were mostly vegetables. But it's definitely in recent years broadened out to include almost anything that you can find at a farmer's market, for example, and even some things that you can't find. So some not that extraordinary alternatives to vegetables might be eggs, meat, also fruit. That's a little bit more of a unique one. Definitely eggs and meat are CSA that go together quite well. People that are fixated on, pasture raised meat and farm fresh eggs can definitely find some options near to us. Fruit as well, like I mentioned, but then I've even seen some seafood CSAs, or specifically a salmon CSA. I saw in the Champaign-Urbana area where this vegetable farmer had a relationship with a fisherman up in Alaska, and once a month they would receive a shipment of like fresh caught, flash frozen coho salmon. So people are definitely getting creative with this stuff. Just recently, I saw a CSA for baked goods and baking materials. So like pastries, flours, that kind of thing as well. So really anything that people eat and want on a consistent basis throughout the year could be a CSA.
So it seems like vegetables are the most common thing that you get with a CSA. What vegetables are most common that you can get with the CSA, and when would you get those?
Yeah, that's a great question. And definitely, this will be year 3 of the CSA lifestyle for me coming up. My wife and I are definitely gonna purchase a share pretty shortly. And in all the CSAs I've had, which are once again vegetable based, definitely carrots are a big one. A whole bunch of different types of greens, usually lettuce, usually kale, and then certain times throughout the year, arugula, some Asian greens like mizuna, bok choy, tatsoi. So I know some people might not have heard of those, but yeah, greens, lettuces, carrots, other root vegetables like beets, radishes. I love beet greens. And if you can get a couple of good bunches of beets, beet greens are something that you usually can't buy in a grocery store. Some grocery stores do have beets with beet greens still attached that look good, but a lot of them don't. So there's definitely some special things you can get in the CSA that if you can get them in other places near you, a lot of times aren't as good of a quality. Trying to think of other things I've gotten. Of course, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, all of the sweet corn. Sometimes sweet corn is a little bit of a hit or miss because that takes up a lot of time and space with growers' operations. So some people will grow everything except that. And then towards the end of the year, you're looking at, pie pumpkins, winter squash, sweet potatoes. There are some farms that offer over 30 different types of vegetables in the CSA throughout the growing season. And they're usually about 20 to 25 weeks long. Typically about May through October is the, normal CSA around here. Could be June through November. And then in one producer's case, Prairie Earth Farms, which is out of Atlanta, Illinois, is next year, I believe, going to a fall overwinter CSA. They're no longer going to do their CSA during the summer. They're just going to focus on producing those summer crops for bigger, wholesale markets, I believe. So there's a lot of different options, but those are the basics.
Can you choose what you want? So say if you didn't like a certain vegetable, can you opt out of that? Or if you have preferences, can you make those suggestions?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten this question a lot. And so the short answer is sometimes. It's definitely up to the producer. So for example, at Slice of Heaven, typically we allowed, if it was a frequent customer that had been with us, at least more than that one growing season, and they came to pick up their share at the farmer's market, and they weren't asking for like the most popular thing in exchange for the least popular thing, then we'd definitely work with them on that. There are some CSAs around us that are set up so you can precisely choose what you want. Cook Farm right here in Bloomington basically has you pay them the money, the cost of the share up front, and then you get a CSA credit card essentially, or debit card. And then you bring that card with you to farm pickups, either at the farmer's market or their farm store out on Towanda Barnes Road. And they'll just debit off of your card amount however much anything costs. So you really range a lot. There are some CSAs that are very much so here's your box or bag of veggies for the week and that's it type deal, and you don't get any say at all. And then there are some that will let you pick whatever you want. And then there are some that, will allow a substitution or two. So really you can shop around for what fits your family needs the most.
And then also, so like if you have a family of 5, obviously you're going to want more food than a single person. Is that an option when doing this?
Yeah, frequently you'll find farmers that offer CSAs, CSA memberships for sale to the public will offer something like a half share for, an individual or a couple, where they'll have, 3 to 5 items, and then a full size share would be like 5 to 7 items. And then sometimes they'll offer a double share. So in the case you just mentioned for, family of 5 or more, definitely a double share of what have you, meat and eggs or veggies would definitely, go a long way. And that's just, double the amount of money that the farmer's getting up front. So I've seen a couple cases actually of farmers adding the double share to their, rotation over time because of demand like that.
That's awesome.
The work that goes into managing the CSA from a farmer standpoint, it's a lot. Some of the growers that I work with, I'll talk with one of them, and she says, I'm on the phone most of the week managing orders because kind of like what you mentioned, some people want this, they don't want that, or how dare you give me more kale than what you already have, things like that. And I think CSA, like community supported agriculture, that's such a noble cause, like feeding the local community, healthy fruits and veggies. But then it seems like a lot of growers get into it and they're like, this is a lot of work because I think it's the one reason why a lot of us got into plants is they're not people. Uh, and CSA farmers, they got to deal with people all the time. So, Nick, was it hard for you when you were on that side of the things, on the grower side of things? Did you have to do a lot of working with the client and customer?
I didn't really. I mean, we had some people, sometimes you leave on vacation during the summer, and you don't pick up that bag at that time. Um, there was definitely a lot of upfront work per week on the logistics side of things, and we would go out into the fields and we would harvest, you know, we would guess how much kale we were going to sell at the market, but then we knew for sure that 46 people were going to pick up their shares at the farm at that time on Tuesday. And so we knew we had to have 46 bunches of kale plus whatever we would sell at market later that week harvested. So like your counting and logistics for those things have to be, at or above your minimum number. Otherwise, you don't have the bare number that you need to fill your CSA bags and things like that. But after that, customer service wise, the farm I worked on did such an amazing job of producing awesome vegetables that basically the customer service side of things was just like learning how to say you're welcome in different ways, because so many people were just so thankful to have like this amount of fresh, clean, nutritious food for them, just brought to their doorstep, or they'd come pick it up, or dropped off at the farmer's market. So in my experience, if growers are doing a good job growing the vegetables or the meat and eggs or what have you, just anecdotally, I didn't think it was that big of a deal customer service wise, like off the farm. On the farm, it was logistically intense, but as soon as you got off the farm and started giving the product and receiving your money, it was not easy, because nothing in farming is easy, but not that bad.
Okay, so I mean, like brass tacks, when we think about some of the biggest hurdles to getting a person to participate in the CSA, and you mentioned you're part of a CSA, like what is the cost weekly, or maybe like what's an average cost? What should we expect?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this number earlier, but a lot of CSAs, once again, are like several $100s up front, anywhere from $250 to $500 or more. But it works out depending on the length of the CSA and when it starts. It works out to about $20 to $30 a week. So I don't know about you, but my grocery bill, just like at Aldi, is for a family of 3 is about $150 plus $50 of other stuff that I buy elsewhere. So that's $200 a week, and it lasts us about 2 weeks. So I think grand total we spend $400 or more on groceries, and I'm not buying the fanciest stuff. So in comparison, just for the fresh food segment of your food that you're going to eat for a month, $20 to $30 a week is, not a drop in the bucket, but I think a lot more people can afford it than they really think. And, you might have to take a little bit out of savings at the beginning to make that big payment, but then the rest of the season you don't pay and you receive vegetables. So it feels like you're at certain points, it feels like you're getting this amazing stuff for free. I know you're not, but like once you swing that initial investment, it's just, as long as the farmer does a good job and the weather holds up even a little bit, it's amazing. So there's definitely, it's not an insignificant cost up front, but I think it's worth it. And the only other obstacle to being a member, in the vegetable world, let's say, is if you don't cook, 3 nights a week at home minimum, I definitely think you should reconsider being a member. What CSA has meant for me is lots of fun-filled times in the kitchen with the family, chopping vegetables, listening to music, talking about our day, just growing closer as a family and eating amazing food. And if you're not kind of into cooking, I'm not sure that this is for you.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah, unless it's baked goods, like a CSA for baked goods, or something that's ready made, like that's a great example. Then that might be worth it. But
I know Ken hires his weekly chef comes into the house every week, and they prepare the food, and yes, they sit down to a delightful bottle of wine. Oh yes,
the children. So it's up to the kids. We have hot dogs and macaroni.
Put a little bit of kale on that hot dog. So, okay, Nick, one more thing you mentioned about the connectedness of the family, but back to the community side of the CSA.
Mm-hmm.
One of we've mentioned maybe a couple different types, like the shares are delivered to you. You go pick up the shares at a farm stand or somewhere on the long roadside. You even mentioned you have like a debit card that you go and use at a farm stand. One that I really liked, that was here in Macomb, they're no longer in operation now. It was this weekly get together. Every Sunday they had a cookout. Their share members came, they harvested. It was like a U-pick almost. They harvest, they picked. The farmers would have a big meal that everyone would come and eat. It was like very community focused thing. And you like not only like where family is getting closer, but you're getting closer with your neighbors. So I think there's another value to it there too.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm an avid listener of the Farmer to Farmer podcast by the now unfortunately deceased host Chris Blanchard. I think I mentioned this podcast in my last appearance on the show, but there are quite a few interviews that Chris did where the farmers that he was interviewing described a situation like you just described to me, where there was an option for, typical pickup at the farmer's market or where have you, but there was also an on-farm U-pick option. And this is also something that Slice of Heaven offered, at least when I was there last. They may still be doing this at the Oregon farm I was at, which is instead of paying for your CSA, there was a work share option. So if you didn't want to pay the $30 a week, you could show up at the farm on harvest day, with the farm crew and go out and pick the carrots and bundle them and wash them and pack them and do the whole 9 yards. And, the crazy part was we only asked for 2 hours of work from the CSA work share in order to pay off that bag of veggies for them, judging by the $15 an hour rate. 2 times 15 is 30. That was about the value of the vegetable bags. But a lot of them stayed on for 4 hours, sometimes full days, depending on the amount of time they had, just because they loved, being involved on the farm, and they felt like they had a bigger stake in it, and that it was more meaningful to them rather than like, here's my money, give me my veggies. Okay, see you next week. So there's definitely, if you're a producer, I think it would be really cool to consider doing what you just described, because as far as I know, I don't think there are any producers in our area, at least around Bloomington, that offer such a thing. And I think it's a really interesting way, really informative way to get to know your food shed, as it were.
So going back to kind of what you mentioned earlier, that most CSAs are kind of in that April, May, June start time into October, November. And you mentioned winter CSAs. So what kind of stuff would you be getting kind of with the winter CSA, and why do you think those aren't quite as popular as our kind of our typical time frame?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So your first question, what might you typically be getting in a winter CSA? So a lot of storage crops. So what do I mean by storage crops? I mean winter squash, which are typically, your butternuts, spaghetti squash, acorn squash, also your sweet potatoes, your storage roots. So, sweet potatoes, carrots, onions, beets, radishes, those types of things. So I think as a society, even bigger than the United States, just in the Western mindset, we've been trained to be able to have whatever we want produce wise all the time, because we have this interconnected, global ability to ship food thousands of miles. And we've kind of gotten away from the seasonality of food as it once was, right? So you can't grow a tomato in New England in January, nor can you in Illinois, right? So some would have it that, maybe you just don't buy tomatoes at that time of year so that you're not contributing to, global warming, large carbon footprint, et cetera. But I think that's really hard for people that don't know how to cook or they know how to cook, but they don't have the time, or, myriad other reasons. I think that seasonality of eating is hard for some people, either to tolerate or to work into their schedules, or they just don't want to do that. So I think why winter CSAs might not be as popular is because as a society, some of us have forgotten how to cook these things, especially right now I have about 4 or 5 winter squashes on my counter, and we know how to cook them, and I know how to cook them really well. So we've gotten a lot of them, and we're definitely doing our best to keep up. And sometimes with your busy work life, it's just not possible, or you don't want to eat it every other day. In this case, it's just my fault. I didn't get into cooking them until right about the Christmas time. So we're working through our stash, but what's really cool is they don't go bad. I mean, they sit on my counter. They'll sit on my counter for another couple months, and nothing will happen as long as it's 65, 67 degrees. So did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yeah, that's good.
Great.
I once forgot a spaghetti squash in my pantry, and 3 months later, I grabbed it. We ate it. It was still fine once you cut into it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't go soft on us.
No, I mean, you might get some discoloration. You might get a little maybe the slightest amount of softening in the place right where it rests on the counter.
Yeah.
But a lot of these things store for a long time and almost indefinitely if they're in the cold. So carrots, for example, at the Student Sustainable Farm at University of Illinois in Urbana, when I was there as a grad student, one of my research projects was a weed control study using carrots as the test crop, because carrots are notoriously bad at competing with weeds, and it worked. I grew a ton of carrots, and we put them in, we harvested them, cut the greens off, put them in plastic bags, put the plastic bags in wooden crates in October, and the student farm took them out in February or March to sell to the dining service, and they were grade A still, so these things can at 33 degrees can last almost half a year sometimes.
By the way, this is a total aside, but I think we were all participating in some shape or form in the Specialty Crops Conference last week in Springfield. I'm super stoked to try winter growing again. I used to do it more often, but yeah, I heard Dr. Alan Walters from Carbondale was talking about winter carrots, and I've done that before, and I want to do it again now. He got me stoked again. So winter crops can totally be a thing.
Yeah, I was unfortunately attending remotely last week, so I don't think I got to watch that one because I was only watching the live stream stuff. I'm still working through the backlog of recordings from the conference, but I'll have to go back and watch that one.
It's the Dixon Springs crop update on the first or second day. Bronwyn Ali was doing that one. So
let's put that in the show notes for sure, because that's something I would love for folks to look into, is winter growing.
Oh yeah.
And this kind of relates really quickly to Ken's previous question. Why aren't winter CSAs, more popular than they are right now? It's really hard to grow all year round as a grower. I mean, they bust their humps, from February through God knows, November into December sometimes. And right now, after Christmas until, slightly before Christmas till end of January is just about all the break time during the year that some of these people get. So to factor in, okay, I'm going to plant carrots in September so they can be ready in January. And you go out in your high tunnel when it's, 0 degrees out. And at some point you got to take a break. Otherwise people get exhausted. So, and that's a good way to burn out, is to start a farm and then be an all year farm out the gate. Not something most people do.
So Nick, are you participating in a winter CSA right now?
Indeed. Yeah. We are subscribed to the Prairie Earth Winter CSA. We went with Prairie Earth Farms in May or June of this year for the what remained at that point of their normal, I'll say, CSA. So from May through October. After being a member, I was a member of Cook Farm CSA here in Bloomington, and they were the unfortunate victims of our massive amount of flooding here in the county and elsewhere over the Mother's Day weekend. And so I'm hoping to subscribe to their CSA program again this year when they get up and running. But last year, we still, we needed to have veggies. We're just like addicted to the veggie lifestyle, addicted to the CSA lifestyle. So we went with Prairie Earth's typical CSA. Now we're in the winter one. And just this past week, we got in our share, we got carrots, head lettuce, daikon radish, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, regular potatoes. It's called ugly garlic because it was like slightly misformed, but it's still delicious. I think I might be missing one or two things. So that's like a slice of, what you might expect over the winter. Once again, it's like your hearty winter greens and, storage roots.
And would you say, is it usually enough produce for your family for the week, or do you guys use it all?
Yeah, that's like one of our favorite games we like to play over the course of the week is can you use it like by next Thursday? Because if you don't, some of it can go bad, or like what's happening on my kitchen counter right now, the counter can fill up with winter squash, and neither my wife nor myself like visual clutter. We like everything to be in its place, and just like this mound of winter squash on the counter looks really cool for a while, but then it starts to make you feel guilty. So I think over the weekend, we took one of those acorn squash. We cut it in half, scraped out the seeds, drizzled it the inside in olive oil and salt and black pepper, with the face side down on a baking tray at like 400 degrees for an hour, I want to say. And took that out and added a mix of marinara sauce and goat cheese in there, and just scooped out the squash meat, which was super tender after that, put it in a bowl with some pasta as well, and that was just amazing. So it can be done. Cooking with them is easier than you think, but yeah, we do try our best to finish it in a week, and it is enough.
Yeah, that sounds delicious.
That sounds really good.
It's really good. Yeah. I mean, all you need is a can of pasta sauce from Aldi, little chunk of goat cheese from Aldi, and then a CSA subscription.
Do you find too, like the CSAs ever provide recipes or anything to go along with like the produce that they're providing for the week?
Excellent question. Some of them don't, and I don't know why, because the ones that do are super popular. So yeah, that's a great way to, like solve this dilemma of I would love to support my local producers, and I do have time to cook, but I'm not really that good at it. And yeah, both Marietta Easley, one of the proprietors of Slice of Heaven Farm, my previous boss, she loves sending out, the weekly update with one of her favorite recipes for, what they're doing that week. I think one of my favorites was a radish salsa. Never heard of that before being on the farm. And we'd talk about those recipes as well to folks at the farmers market that weren't CSA members, but we just, hip them to that as well. So definitely being involved with your local farming scene is, especially if your CSA provider gives you recipes, it's a great way to learn how to cook at the same time.
Say for all that extra vegetables or even some of the leftover things that you don't eat. My mom walked in over the holidays to our kitchen and she said, I've never met anyone that has a worm bin in their kitchen, but I do, because all the scraps just get, oh, Ken's got one in his kitchen. There you go. All right. 2 people on this call have worm bins in their kitchen. So
I need to get with you guys after the call or at some other point and figure out how I may also join this club. But yeah, I mean, if you have, we actually have a giant compost pile in our backyard, and it's really good stuff. And what we do is we have a 5-gallon bucket in the kitchen, and yeah, anything that's like past its prime will go in there. I also have a gallon plastic bag in my freezer, which is for the butt ends of celery and carrots and onions and things that we constantly discard that are still edible. And I'll fill that plastic gallon bag up and then make some awesome veggie stock too. So definitely, if it's like kind of past its prime, goes in the freezer bag. If it's way past its prime, goes to the compost bin. Another good option is chickens. if you have chickens, they love to scratch and eat, kale and collards and, not just leafy greens, but, the rotten parts of tomatoes and the husks of corn. And I mean, you name it. So anything that you can put in the compost bin, except maybe eggshells, I would throw to the chickens as well.
Oh yeah. Well, Nick, we kind of talked about this already, but I would say like the grocery store, it has made us maybe a little bit picky about what types of vegetables and things we want. And we mentioned how you can work maybe with your farmer, your grower, to change some things around and some of the different styles. I'm curious though, I have seen some of these, what are they, like cooperative CSAs, where it's like multiple growers, you got a dairy farmer, you got meat growers, you got vegetables, you got the salmon, catch of the week that's flown in. Are those like really common? Are those becoming more popular? Because it seems like you need to have something to give yourself a little bit of an edge over that grocery store with that selection that you might get.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know that there's a group out in Livingston County, and I'm always I hope I don't get a text message about this, but I'm always trying to remember what their name is, because there's a couple different names of groups of growers in Livingston County, but Stewards of the Land, I believe, is the name. Marty and Will Travis are it used to be called Down at the Farms, are offering something related to what you just mentioned. They'll have an order form every week of what they have, and they get stuff flown in from California, like citrus. They also have honey from local producers, meat from other local producers, eggs, corn grits, lots of different artisan grains. So that is much more so the cooperative, like, here's all these growers and everything that they have on hand this week, what do you want, type deal. And then you fill out that form and you go pick it up a couple days later. I wouldn't say that's getting more common, only because it's logistically, that is a lot to manage. They're doing it really well. I would love to talk to them a little bit more about, how they can potentially streamline something like that. So, maybe it could become more common. Definitely, I think CSA growers banding together with other growers is a great idea. So once again, in Farmer to Farmer podcast, I've heard of folks doing the vegetable model, but sweet corn and winter squash take up a lot of space and they take a lot of time. Same thing with like watermelons, cantaloupe, stuff that people like to eat, but once again, like vines all over the place, not easy to manage when you're doing 30 other things for 30 other crops. So like, I know a farmer who grows, the typical things I described in the CSA: carrots, onions, peppers, tomatoes, the really popular stuff, lettuce. And then they'll actually contract out with an Amish grower who only grows summer and winter squash and melons. And like, those Amish farmers don't need to go retail. They don't need to go to the farmer's market, don't need to go to the grocery store. They sell to that other farmer. And some people have reservations about, supporting a CSA that buys in, but having been on a CSA operation before, I'm definitely here to say, like, I don't find any shame in that whatsoever. And if I can get more stuff for the same price as a producer, and the farmer can make their CSA share more attractive because there are more options that people like to eat just being offered, I don't see what the problem is.
I think there's multiple ways to go about it. I mean, for many years I've been hearing certain like growers, like educator growers, celebrity growers, whatever, they're like, pick like one or two crops and become really good at that. And then that's what you'll be known for. And so, but then on the other side of things, though, there's also the kind of more the traditional vegetable farmer, where they're growing, like, as you mentioned with the CSA, like 20 different types of crops throughout the growing season, even more than that. So yeah, I there's multiple ways to go about that. So cool.
Yeah. Just like in agriculture, there's about a million ways to do literally anything you could describe: apple pruning, vegetable growing, vegetable marketing. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So if somebody isn't convinced yet, in about a sentence or so, can you explain why somebody who's not part of a CSA should consider joining one this year?
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. All right. So CSAs are a way to support your local farms, invest your food dollars in your community instead of sending them out of the community. And at the same time, if the farmer is doing a decent job raising the crops or the goods that they're raising, you're going to be treating yourself and your family to increased health from healthful food products that you'll get hopefully as a result of being a member. Last but not least, a farmer who's curating a product to your family is going to care a lot about the quality of their product, and you're going to form an intimate relationship with somebody that's feeding you food on a weekly basis. I've become good friends with some of our CSA members from the farm I worked on, and I've also become good friends with farmers who have been the farmers offering me the CSA program. So just myriad different ways to support this system, and I think it's worth every penny.
So I think you've done a great job selling us on CSAs, Nick.
Mhm.
But if someone was interested in getting involved in a CSA, what suggestions do you have for them to figure out what they have available to them locally?
Yeah, great question. There is a really cool resource I just found last week when I was typing up these talking points, and it's from this website called Buy Fresh, Buy Local, Central Illinois. And the title of the webpage is The Almost Complete List of CSA Farms in Central Illinois. And Central Illinois, in their definition, ranges anywhere from Decatur to northeast Ford County, all the way west of Peoria to all the way east of Champaign. So it is a pretty wide swath. And if you're listening in Bloomington, you'll find some Bloomington options. If you're listening in Champaign, you'll find some Champaign options. But also, there are a lot of small towns in between all those locations. Even on over towards Macomb, where I just right before this show had to Google a couple of the names of the towns because they were that small and I didn't know where they were, even though I've lived here almost my whole life. So yeah, that's one good resource. I do want to rattle off a couple from McLean, Woodford, and Livingston County. Just plugging my local farmers here. So in McLean County, we have Cook Farm. They do the regular vegetable program, and they're good for, in my experience, staple goods. Your lettuce, your carrots, peppers, tomatoes, etc. There's Epiphany Farms, also in Bloomington, which does something Chris was mentioning, which is lumping together an optional egg share, an optional bread share. So they're kind of like edging towards the full diet Epiphany Farms CSA type thing. Prairie Earth Farms is out of Atlanta, Illinois. And there's also Henry's Farm in the Congerville area. So all those folks are doing vegetables, and they're in my immediate vicinity in McLean County. There's also Sunny Lane Aronia Farm in Woodford County, and that's a fruit CSA. And then in Livingston County, Timber Feast Farms is a meat CSA, and I also believe they do eggs. They had a really awesome option for Thanksgiving turkey that we bought this past year, so that was cool too. That's just in my three counties, but there are a couple other resources online. I would just Google CSAs near me, and do a little bit of detective work. Don't be afraid to reach out to farmers through their Facebook pages and send them a message. Say, hey, I'm so and so. I'm thinking about your CSA. Could we schedule a time to talk sometime? Set up a phone call, send an email. This is your food for next year we're talking about. So, that's worth a decent amount of time and investigation in my view.
I would definitely need that optional egg share because there's nothing that I love more than eggs and some wilted chard. That's with some garlic. Now I'm hungry again. I'm gonna have to go look for my nearest CSA grower because this has been so I don't know. I just keep everything is just building up, hopeful for spring, and it can't get here soon enough now. But I will enjoy this winter time. Don't you worry, Ken. We'll go sledding here again, drink some hot cocoa outside. Nick Frillman, local foods educator. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Chris. And hey, I think you should poll some future attendees of the program for me. My wife Emily and I were thinking about this concept because winter is always so hard to get through until the growing season. What if Christmas were on January 25th?
Oh, yes.
Because you have Thanksgiving and then Christmas is right after that, like a couple weeks later, and then we have this like doldrums of the winter that we have to get through until the growing season. If you had something like January 25th Christmas to look forward to. Anyway, see if it flies with other good growing attendees, and yeah, let's start a January Christmas movement.
I would think so. Ken, you're our Christmas expert here. I mean, you celebrate what, all year?
Why not two?
Why not two Christmases?
There you go. Anyway, yeah, it was great to be on, and I'm happy to answer other CSA questions if anybody wants to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is produced by Wendy Ferguson. This week, it is edited by Katie Parker. I am Chris Enroth, and a special thank you to our co-hosts with us every single week, Katie Parker, Ken Johnson. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for joining us and providing us all that great information. And Chris and Ken, it's good to see you guys again after break.
Yes, thank you, Nick. I learned a lot. And Chris and Katie, it's good seeing you again. So it's kind of weird doing this. I forgot what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, it's all new.
But now that we're back in the routine, let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. Now that we've started a new year, let's look back on the last year and see what kind of questions this podcast raised for you. I've had a couple questions that have come in the last few months, and so we're going to answer those next week. And so if you do have questions, please feel free, submit those to us. Our emails will be below in the show notes. So listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening, or if you're watching us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.